I've been using dating apps for 3 years, and I thought I'd seen every type of creep and catfish out there. What happened to me on March 15, 2023, in downtown Sacramento made me realize that some people will go to terrifying lengths to force their way into your life. What started as a random street encounter turned into a carefully orchestrated deception that still makes me check over my shoulder every time I leave my apartment on Maple Avenue. I was walking to my lunch break from my job at Pacific Marketing Solutions on J Street when this guy approached me near the Starbucks on the corner of 10th and J. It was one of those overcast days where the clouds look like they might open up any minute, and I was trying to get my errands done before the rain started. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, with brown hair and wearing a gray hoodie and dark jeans. Nothing immediately threatening about his appearance, but something felt off from the moment he started talking. "Excuse me," he said, stepping directly into my path with this overly confident smile. "I saw you walking and I just had to tell you how beautiful you are. You have this amazing energy about you." I gave him a polite smile and tried to step around him, but he moved to block me again. His movements were too quick, too deliberate, like he practiced this. "Thank you, but I'm late getting back to work," I said, checking my phone to make the excuse clear. "Come on, just give me 5 minutes," he pressed, his voice getting more insistent. "I promise you won't regret it. I can tell you're different from other girls. You're not like those shallow women who only care about money and status." That phrase always sets off alarm bells for me. I shook my head firmly and said, "I'm really not interested, but thank you for the compliment." I tried to walk past him again, but he grabbed my arm just above the elbow. "Wait, don't be like that," he said, his grip tightening slightly. I could feel his fingers pressing into my skin through my jacket. "I'm not some random creep hitting on you. I have a good job in tech, I drive a nice car. That's my 2020 BMW 3 Series right there." He pointed to a black sedan parked across the street. "I could take you somewhere really nice for lunch right now. Somewhere way better than whatever corporate cafeteria you're heading back to." The fact that he'd been watching me long enough to make assumptions about where I worked made my stomach turn. I pulled my arm free and took a step back. I said no. "Please leave me alone." His whole demeanor changed in an instant. The friendly smile disappeared completely, and his eyes got this cold, calculating look that made me think of a predator sizing up prey. "You don't know what you're missing," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Girls like you always think you're too good for guys like me. You probably go for those pretty boy losers who treat you like shit. But I'm not giving up that easily. I never give up when I want something." The way he said it, with that dead serious tone, sent chills down my spine. I quickly walked away, looking back over my shoulder to make sure he wasn't following me. He was still standing there in the exact same spot, watching me with that same unsettling stare, not even pretending to look away when I caught him staring. I ducked into the Starbucks and waited inside for about 15 minutes, pretending to browse my phone while actually watching the window to see if he'd leave. When I finally saw his BMW pull away from the curb, I waited another 5 minutes before heading back to work, taking Pine Street instead of my usual route on J Street just in case he was circling the block. I told my coworker Jennifer about the encounter when I got back to the office. She's been living in Sacramento longer than me and has plenty of her own stories about aggressive guys downtown. She suggested I report it to the police, but what could I say? A guy asked me out aggressively and made me uncomfortable? He hadn't technically threatened me with violence or committed any obvious crime. I decided to just be more careful about my lunch route and hoped I'd never see him again. For the next week, I kept looking over my shoulder, especially around the downtown area. I started varying my lunch times and taking different streets to and from work. I'd catch myself scanning faces in crowds, worried I'd see that gray hoodie and calculating stare. The paranoia was exhausting, and I was having trouble sleeping, but I didn't see him again around the office building or my usual spots, so I started to relax and figured it was just a random encounter with an overly persistent guy who'd moved on to bother someone else. A week later, I was swiping through profiles on Bumble when I matched with someone named Marcus Chin. His profile showed a guy with dark hair, several professional-looking photos, and a bio that mentioned he was a software engineer who loved hiking, trying new restaurants, and had recently moved to Sacramento for work. The photos were good quality, but mostly showed him from different angles. Some were group shots at what looked like company events, others were outdoors shots where he was wearing sunglasses or a baseball cap. His face was clear enough to see he was attractive, but not crystal clear in that way that sometimes makes you suspicious of fake profiles. We chatted for a few days, and he seemed completely normal, funny, intelligent, asking thoughtful questions about my marketing work and my interests. He wasn't pushy about meeting up, didn't immediately try to get my phone number or asked inappropriate questions. He told me about his job at a tech startup, mentioned he was still learning his way around the city, and shared some funny stories about bad dates he'd been on since moving here. Everything felt natural and comfortable. When he suggested we meet for coffee at a place called Riverside Cafe on Folsom Boulevard, I googled it, and it looked perfect. A busy, well-lit spot with good reviews and plenty of other customers around. I'd learned to be careful about first meeting spots after some sketchy experiences, but this seemed ideal. We agreed to meet on a Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. I got there about 10 minutes early, which is my usual habit for first dates. I wanted to scope out the place and make sure I felt comfortable before he arrived. The cafe was exactly what I'd expected, busy but not chaotic, good lighting, tables spread out enough for private conversation but close enough to other people that I'd feel safe. I grabbed a table near the window where I could see the parking lot and ordered a latte while I waited. I was checking my phone and reviewing his profile one more time when I heard someone say, "Sarah? I'm Marcus." I looked up and my blood went completely cold. It was him. The same guy from the street encounter a week earlier. Same height, same build, same brown hair, but he was clean-shaven now and wearing a nice button-down shirt and khakis instead of the gray hoodie and jeans. For a split second, I thought maybe I was mistaken, that this was just an unfortunate coincidence of similar-looking guys. But when our eyes met, I saw that same calculating look I remembered from downtown, and I knew with absolute certainty it was the same person. "Oh my God!" I said, standing up so quickly I almost knocked over my chair. The sudden movement made several other customers look over at us. "You're the guy from the street. From downtown." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes at all. It was the same predatory expression I remembered, just dressed up in nicer clothes. "I thought you might remember me eventually. Funny how things work out, isn't it? Fate has a way of bringing people together. This isn't a coincidence," I said, grabbing my purse and backing away from the table. "You did this on purpose. You planned this whole thing." "Sit down, Sarah," he said calmly, like he was talking to a child having a tantrum. "We're here now. We both took time out of our Saturday. Might as well have that conversation we started last week." "How did you know my name?" I demanded. "How did you find me on the app?" "I never told you my name when you stopped me on the street." He pulled out his phone and showed me my Bumble profile. "You're not hard to find when you know what you're looking for," he said with this smug satisfaction in his voice. "I saw you that day and I knew I had to meet you properly. I figured you'd be more comfortable meeting someone through an app than talking to a stranger on the street. I was just trying to give you what you wanted, a normal, safe way to get to know each other." The casual way he said it, like he was doing me some kind of favor, made my skin crawl. "You created a fake profile to trick me into meeting you?" "It's not fake," he said, looking genuinely offended by the suggestion. "I really am a software engineer. I really do like hiking and trying new restaurants. I just enhanced some of the photos and changed a few details to make sure you'd swipe right. The name thing, Marcus is my middle name. I use it professionally sometimes." I started backing toward the door, but he stood up and moved closer, matching my pace so the distance between us stayed the same. "Where are you going? We haven't even ordered yet. I was thinking we could get some of those pastries. They look amazing." "I'm leaving," I said loudly enough that other customers started looking our way. Stay away from me. Come on, Sarah, he said, his voice taking on that same insistent, wheedling tone from the street encounter. You agreed to meet me. You swiped right on my profile. You obviously liked what you saw and enjoyed our conversations. What's the real problem here? The problem is that you lied to me, I said, my voice getting louder. You stalked me and manipulated me into coming here. You tricked me. He actually laughed at that, a cold sound that made several people at nearby tables stop their conversations to stare at us. Stalked you? That's a little dramatic, don't you think? I asked you out and you said no. So I found another way to ask you out. That's not stalking, that's persistence. That's romance. That's what guys used to do before everyone got so paranoid about everything. I was almost to the door when he said something that made me freeze completely. I know where you work, Sarah. Pacific Marketing Solutions on J Street, 3rd floor. I know what time you get off, what route you usually take home. I know you live in that apartment complex on Maple Avenue, the one with the blue mailboxes out front. Building C, I think? If you walk out of here right now, I'm just going to have to find another way to get your attention. I turned around slowly, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. The other customers were definitely watching now, sensing that something was seriously wrong, but he didn't seem to care at all. He was smiling that cold, calculating smile again. Are you threatening me? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded when I felt like I was falling apart inside. I'm not threatening anyone, he said, raising his hands in mock innocence. I'm just saying that running away isn't going to solve anything between us. I'm going to keep trying until you give me a real chance. We could do this the easy way, like civilized adults having coffee, or the hard way. But either way, we're going to have a relationship. I've already invested too much time and energy in this to give up now. That's when I knew I was in real danger. This wasn't just some overly persistent guy who couldn't take a hint. This was someone who had spent an entire week researching me, learning my routines, creating a fake dating profile with stolen or manipulated photos, and luring me to a meeting under completely false pretenses. And now he was basically telling me he considered me his property, and wasn't going to stop pursuing me no matter what I said or did. I pulled out my phone and started dialing 911, trying to keep my hands from shaking. I'm calling the police, I said. For what? He asked, but I noticed he took a step back and glanced around at the other customers who were openly staring now. Meeting someone from a dating app? Having a conversation in a public place? What crime do you think I've committed here, Sarah? For harassment and stalking, I said clearly, making sure everyone around us could hear. The 911 operator answered and I quickly explained the situation, that I was being harassed by someone who had created a fake dating profile to trick me into meeting him after I'd already rejected him on the street, and that he just admitted to following me and learning my personal information without my consent. Marcus, or whatever his real name was, must have realized that other people were listening and potentially recording with their phones, because he suddenly switched back to his fake charming persona. Sarah, you're seriously overreacting here, he said loudly, putting on a confused, innocent expression for the audience. We matched on a dating app. We've been chatting for days. This is just a misunderstanding. But it was too late. The barista had come over to see what was happening, and when I quickly explained the situation to her, she told me the cafe had security cameras and she'd actually noticed him earlier. He'd been sitting in his car in the parking lot for about 20 minutes before I arrived, and she'd seen him watching me through the window. The police arrived within 10 minutes. I gave them the whole story, the street encounter, the week of feeling like I was being watched, the fake dating profile with manipulated photos, the veiled threats about knowing where I lived and worked. They took my statement and asked Marcus for his identification. His real name turned out to be Derek Allen Morrison, and when they ran his information through their system, they found some very disturbing results. He had a previous arrest for harassment and cyberstalking from 18 months earlier, and a restraining order had been filed against him by another woman just 6 months ago for similar behavior. creating fake social media profiles to contact her after she'd blocked him, showing up at her workplace, and following her home. They arrested him right there in the cafe for stalking, harassment, and identity fraud related to the fake dating profile. The officer told me I could file for a restraining order and that they'd be investigating his online activities to see if he'd done this to other women. They also wanted to examine his phone and computer to see what other information he'd gathered about me and potentially other victims. The whole thing was over in about an hour, but I sat in my car in the parking lot for another 30 minutes afterward, shaking and trying to process what had just happened. I kept thinking about all the what-ifs. What might have happened if I hadn't recognized him, if I'd met him somewhere more isolated, if I hadn't been able to call for help, if other customers hadn't been there to witness his threats. I deleted all my dating apps that day and haven't used them since. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily he'd manipulated the system, how he'd used my own photos and information against me, how he'd spent an entire week studying me like I was some kind of research project. The violation felt almost worse than if someone had broken into my apartment. I found out later, during the investigation, that he'd been much more thorough than I'd initially realized. He'd found my Instagram and LinkedIn accounts, had screenshots of my posts going back months, and had even located some of my friends' social media profiles. He knew the name of my company, my job title, the general area where I lived, and had apparently driven by my apartment complex multiple times to learn my schedule. The restraining order was approved without any issues, and Derek was sentenced to 8 months in jail and 2 years of probation. During the investigation, police found evidence that he'd done similar things to at least 3 other women over the past 2 years, creating fake profiles, stalking them online, gathering personal information, and harassing them when they rejected his advances. One woman had actually had to move to a different city because he wouldn't leave her alone. I moved to a different apartment complex in a different part of town and changed jobs 2 months later. I know it seems extreme, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew too much about my life, my routines, my personal details. Even with him in jail, I kept expecting to see him around every corner, kept jumping every time someone approached me on the street. The whole experience taught me that the people we think we're safely meeting through dating apps could be literally anyone. They could be someone who's been watching us for weeks, studying us, learning our habits, waiting for the perfect moment to insert themselves into our lives under false pretenses. The technology that's supposed to make dating safer and more convenient can be weaponized by people who refuse to accept rejection and see other people as objects to be obtained rather than human beings with their own agency. I've started dating again recently, but I'm much more careful now. I always video chat with matches before meeting them in person. I only meet in very public places during busy times, and I always tell multiple friends exactly where I'm going, when I expect to be back, and send them photos of the person I'm meeting. I've learned to trust my instincts completely. If something feels off, even if I can't articulate exactly why, I end the interaction immediately. What's your worst experience with someone you met online? Have you ever had that gut feeling that someone wasn't who they claimed to be, even when you couldn't prove it? I'd love to hear your stories and safety tips in the comments. Let's help each other stay safe while dating in this digital age. What I discovered about my girlfriend's family last summer still haunts me. I thought I was just meeting some overprotective parents who wanted to get to know the guy their daughter was dating. What I walked into on July 8, 2023, in Riverside, California, was something so twisted and controlling that it changed how I look at seemingly normal families forever. I'd been talking to this girl named Emma Rodriguez on Hinge for about 2 weeks. She seemed perfect, gorgeous, funny, studying psychology at UC Riverside, loved hiking and indie music. Her profile was refreshingly genuine compared to the usual filtered photos and generic bios I'd been seeing. We had this amazing chemistry over text, and our phone conversations would go on for hours. But there was something a little odd about how she approached meeting up. Every time I suggested we grab coffee or dinner, she'd deflect and say her parents were really traditional and wanted to meet any guy she was seriously interested in before she could go on actual dates. At first I thought it was sweet, a close family that cared about each other. My parents are just really protective, she explained during one of our late-night calls. They immigrated here from Mexico when I was little, and they've always been very involved in my life choices. They think dating apps are dangerous, so they want to make sure you're a good person before we go out alone. I respected that. My own parents had always been hands-off about my dating life, but I understood that different families had different values. When Emma invited me to dinner at their house to meet them, I actually looked forward to it. It felt serious, like she was really interested in building something real with me. Their house was in a quiet neighborhood off Magnolia Avenue, a nice 2-story place with a well-maintained front yard and a white picket fence. Very suburban, very normal looking. I brought flowers for her mother and dressed nicely, khakis, button-down shirt, the whole respectful boyfriend look. Emma's father, Carlos, answered the door. He was a big guy, probably 6 feet 3 inches, with graying hair and calloused hands that suggested he did physical work. He shook my hand with a grip that felt like a test and looked me up and down appraisingly. "You must be David," he said. "Come in. We've been looking forward to meeting you." Emma's mother, Maria, was in the kitchen finishing dinner preparations. She was smaller than I'd expected from Emma's descriptions, maybe 5 feet 2 inches, but there was something intense about her eyes. She smiled when Carlos introduced us, but it felt rehearsed. "Thank you for the flowers," she said, taking them from me. "That shows good manners. Sit down, dinner is almost ready." Emma looked beautiful but nervous. She kept glancing between me and her parents like she was worried about something. During dinner, the conversation felt strangely formal. Carlos asked me detailed questions about my job and finance, my family background, my future plans. Maria wanted to know about my education, my health, whether I had any chronic conditions or genetic disorders in my family. Some of the questions seemed weirdly specific. "Do you have any history of mental illness?" Maria asked while passing the rice. "Depression, anxiety, anything like that?" "Just normal stress from work," I said, laughing nervously. "Nothing serious." "What about your parents?" Carlos continued. "Any divorces in your family? Any history of domestic violence or addiction?" I started to feel like I was being interviewed for a security clearance rather than having dinner with my girlfriend's family. But I answered everything honestly, figuring they were just being thorough. After dinner, Carlos suggested we go to the living room to continue getting to know each other. That's when things got really weird. "We have some activities we like to do with Emma's potential suitors," Maria said, bringing out a folder full of papers. "Just some fun exercises to help us all get comfortable with each other." The first exercise was a written questionnaire. 20 pages of questions about everything from my financial situation to my views on marriage and children to my sexual history. Some of the questions were incredibly personal, asking about my relationship with my mother, whether I'd ever been violent, what I thought about women working outside the home. "This seems a bit much," I said, looking at Emma for support. She was sitting on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. "Just go along with it," she whispered. "Please. They need to trust you." So I filled out the questionnaire, thinking it would be over after that. But then Carlos brought out what he called scenario cards. He'd read me a hypothetical situation and I was supposed to explain how I'd handle it. "Your wife wants to go out with her girlfriends on a Friday night, but you've had a long week at work and want her to stay home with you. What do you do?" "I'd want her to have fun with her friends," I said. "I'm not going to control her social life." Carlos and Maria exchanged a look that I couldn't interpret. They wrote something down in a notebook. "Your wife starts gaining weight after having children and becomes less attractive to you. How do you handle this?" The questions kept getting more uncomfortable. They were testing my reactions to scenarios involving infidelity, financial stress, family conflicts. It felt like they were trying to find my breaking point or discover some hidden flaw in my character. Then came the physical tests. Carlos wanted to see how I'd react under pressure, so he had me do push-ups while he yelled criticisms at me. Maria timed me solving math problems while she played loud music and flashed bright lights in my eyes. "We need to know you can handle stress," Carlos explained when I asked what this had to do with dating his daughter. Marriage is stressful. We need to know you won't crack under pressure. The whole time, Emma sat there watching with this expression of resigned horror. She looked like she wanted to disappear. The final test was the strangest. They brought out a photo album filled with pictures of Emma from childhood to present day. They wanted me to go through each photo and explain what I found attractive about her at each age, what kind of mother I thought she'd be based on how she looked with younger cousins, whether I could handle her during what they called her difficult phases. Some of the photos showed Emma looking uncomfortable or sad. When I asked about those, Maria would say things like, "Oh, that was during her rebellious period. She needed extra discipline then." I was starting to feel sick. This wasn't protective parenting. This was something else entirely. Around 10 p.m., they finally declared the testing phase complete. Carlos and Maria excused themselves to the kitchen to discuss my results, while Emma and I sat in awkward silence in the living room. "Emma, what the hell was that?" I whispered. "I know it's weird," she said, not meeting my eyes. "But they've always been like this. They did the same thing with my sister's boyfriends. Your sister went through this too. She married the guy who scored highest on their tests," Emma said quietly. "He was the third one they tested. The first two didn't pass." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean, didn't pass?" Before she could answer, Carlos and Maria returned with serious expressions. "David," Carlos said, sitting down across from me, "we've reviewed your performance tonight, and we have some concerns." "Concerns?" "Your answers about financial planning were inadequate," Maria said, reading from their notebook. "You showed signs of weakness during the stress tests. And your responses to the scenario questions suggest you might not be firm enough in your decision-making. We're going to need you to come back next weekend for additional testing." Carlos continued. "We have some other exercises we'd like you to complete." I looked at Emma, hoping she'd say something, but she was staring at her hands. "What if I don't want to come back?" I asked. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Carlos and Maria both stared at me with the coldest expressions I'd ever seen. "That would be disappointing," Maria said slowly. "We've invested a lot of time in evaluating you. Emma has invested emotional energy in you. It would be very selfish of you to waste that investment." "Emma," I said, standing up. "Can we talk privately?" "No," Carlos said firmly. "Anything you need to say to Emma, you can say in front of us. We don't keep secrets in this family." That's when I realized Emma wasn't going to help me. She was as trapped in this situation as I was, maybe more so. "I think I should go," I said. "That's your choice," Maria said. "But understand that if you leave now, you're choosing to end your relationship with Emma. We don't allow her to date men who can't commit to our family process." I looked at Emma one more time, hoping she'd say something, anything, to indicate she wanted to get out of this situation too. But she just sat there, looking defeated. I left that night feeling like I'd escaped something terrible, but I couldn't stop thinking about Emma. She was clearly being controlled by her parents in ways that went far beyond normal protectiveness. I tried calling and texting her, but she didn't respond. A week later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Emma, using a friend's phone. She asked if we could meet secretly at a coffee shop near campus. When I saw her, she looked exhausted and scared. She told me that after I left, her parents had been furious. They'd confiscated her phone and started setting up meetings with other guys they'd found on dating apps, using her profile, pretending to be her. They'd been doing this for 2 years, she said, crying. They created my dating profile without asking me. They screen all my matches and decide who gets to meet me. The guys who pass their tests get to keep dating me, but only under their supervision. The ones who fail get blocked and reported. Emma, that's insane. You're 22 years old. They can't control your love life like this. You don't understand, she said. They've convinced me that this is normal, that this is how you find a good husband. They say if I try to date on my own, I'll make bad choices and end up with someone who'll hurt me. She told me that her older sister had gone through the same process, and was now married to a man her parents had essentially chosen for her. The marriage was miserable, but their parents considered it a success because the husband was financially stable and respectful to authority. They have this whole system, Emma explained. They research guys online before agreeing to meet them. They've developed these tests over years of trial and error. They keep detailed files on everyone who comes to the house. What kind of files? Photos, personal information, results from their tests. They said they want to make sure they can find the right person for me, but I think they just enjoy having control over people. That's when she told me the most disturbing part. Her parents had been in contact with other families in their community who had similar approaches to their children's dating lives. They shared strategies, compared notes, and even recommended potential matches to each other. It's like a network, she said. There are at least 6 families I know of who do this. The parents all talk to each other about their children's dating prospects. They think they're protecting us, but it feels like we're being traded like property. I convinced Emma to let me help her get out of this situation. We contacted a counselor at her college who specialized in family control and manipulation. The counselor explained that what Emma's parents were doing was a form of psychological abuse called coercive control. Emma moved into a dorm on campus and started the process of establishing independence from her parents. It wasn't easy. They threatened to cut off her tuition money, showed up at her work, and tried to convince other family members that she was being manipulated by me. The worst part was discovering that her parents had been catfishing multiple guys simultaneously. They'd created profiles on several dating apps using Emma's photos and information, and they had ongoing conversations with dozens of men who thought they were talking to her. They'd invite the most promising candidates to their house for testing sessions, sometimes having multiple guys in the same week. Emma found their computer files and discovered they'd been documenting everything: photos of the guys who came to the house, recordings of the testing sessions, detailed notes about each person's responses, and suitability scores. They'd rated men like they were livestock at auction. Some of the guys had been coming back for weeks, thinking they were in a relationship with Emma when she'd never even seen their messages. Her parents would tell them she was shy or busy with school, keeping them engaged while they ran their tests. The college counselor helped Emma file a report with the campus police about the fake profiles and identity theft. Several of the men who'd been catfished also filed complaints once they realized what had happened. Emma's parents were ultimately charged with identity theft and online fraud for using her photos and information without consent to create fake dating profiles. They pleaded guilty and received probation, but the damage to their family was permanent. Emma and I dated for a few more months, but the trauma of what she'd been through made it difficult for her to trust her own judgment about relationships. She's been in therapy ever since, working on rebuilding her sense of autonomy and learning to make her own choices. The experience taught me that controlling behavior in families can be much more sophisticated and systematic than most people realize. Emma's parents genuinely believed they were protecting her, but they were actually treating her like property and manipulating everyone around them to maintain control. I still think about all the other guys who went through their testing process. How many men were psychologically evaluated and manipulated by people who had no right to do so? How many were made to feel inadequate or rejected based on arbitrary criteria designed by controlling parents? Have you ever encountered families that seemed a little too involved in their adult children's dating lives? What would you do if you discovered someone you were interested in wasn't actually the person you'd been talking to online? I'd love to hear your thoughts on where the line is between protective parenting and controlling behavior. What I discovered about the girl I thought I was helping last autumn still makes me question everything about online relationships. I believed I was being a good person, helping someone in need who'd reached out to me through a dating app. What I found on November 18, 2023, in the small town of Woodland, California, shattered my faith in human honesty and taught me that loneliness can drive people to commit truly disturbing deceptions. It started innocently enough. I was swiping through Bumble one evening in early October when I matched with a girl named Ashley Martinez. Her profile showed a pretty 23-year-old with long dark hair, studying nursing at Sacramento State. Her bio mentioned that she was new to the area, didn't know many people, and was looking for friends as much as romantic connections. Our first conversations were refreshingly different from the usual dating app small talk. She didn't seem interested in meeting up right away or talking about typical dating topics. Instead, she wanted to know about my job as an electrician, asked thoughtful questions about my family, and shared what seemed like genuine struggles about being alone in a new city. "I moved here to take care of my grandmother," she told me during one of our text exchanges. "She's been having health problems, and I'm basically her only family. It's been really isolating, you know? I spend most of my time either at school or helping her around the house." I felt for her. My own grandmother had passed away the year before, and I remembered how difficult it had been watching her struggle with simple tasks that used to be easy for her. When Ashley mentioned that her grandmother's house needed some electrical work done, and she couldn't afford to hire a professional, I offered to help. "You don't have to do that," she texted back. "I know you don't even know me that well." "It's no problem," I replied. "I have free time on weekends, and it sounds like you're dealing with a lot. Happy to help." We arranged for me to come by the following Saturday to look at some flickering lights and an outlet that had stopped working. She gave me an address on Cedar Lane in Woodland, about a 40-minute drive from my apartment in Sacramento. She explained that she'd be at work but her grandmother would be home to let me in and show me what needed to be fixed. When I arrived at the house, it was a small, older place with faded yellow siding and an overgrown front yard. The kind of home where an elderly person on a fixed income might live. I knocked on the front door, and after a few minutes, an older woman answered. She was probably in her 70s, with gray hair pulled back in a bun and wearing a floral housecoat. She looked frail but had sharp, intelligent eyes behind thick glasses. "You must be Tyler," she said with a warm smile. "Ashley told me you were coming to help with the electrical problems. I'm Rose, her grandmother. Come in, come in." The house smelled like old furniture and lavender air freshener. It was clean but cluttered, filled with the kind of knickknacks and family photos you'd expect in a grandmother's home. Rose walked slowly, using a cane, but she was chatty and seemed grateful for the help. "Ashley is such a good girl," she said as she showed me to the kitchen where the problematic outlet was located. "She works so hard, between school and taking care of me. I worry about her not having friends her own age." I spent a couple of hours fixing the electrical issues, which were fairly straightforward problems with old wiring. Rose brought me coffee and homemade cookies, and we talked while I worked. She told me about her late husband, her health problems, and how much she appreciated Ashley moving in to help her. "It gets lonely here," she admitted. "Most of my friends have passed away or moved to assisted living. Ashley is wonderful company, but I know it's hard for a young person to spend so much time with an old lady like me." When I finished the work, Rose insisted on paying me something, but I refused. She seemed genuinely touched by the gesture. "Ashley picked a good one," she said with a knowing smile. "She's been talking about you quite a bit." Over the next few weeks, Ashley and I continued texting regularly. She was always grateful for the help I provided and kept me updated on how her grandmother was doing. When she mentioned that Rose needed help with some yard work and minor repairs around the house, I offered to come by again. This became a pattern over the next month. Every few weeks, Ashley would mention something her grandmother needed help with: cleaning gutters, moving furniture, fixing a leaky faucet. I'd drive out to Woodland on weekends and spend a few hours helping Rose with whatever needed to be done. Rose was always appreciative and seemed to enjoy the company. She'd tell me stories about her younger days, show me old photo albums, and ask about my life and work. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and I found myself looking forward to our conversations. But I started to notice some odd things. Ashley never seemed to be there when I visited, even though she supposedly lived in the house. Rose would always have explanations. Ashley was at work, or school, or running errands, but it seemed strange that our schedules never aligned. Also, When I text Ashley about the work I'd done or asked her to thank her grandmother for the meals Rose would send home with me, her responses seemed oddly detached. She'd say things like, "I'll let her know," or, "She mentioned you did a great job," but never with the kind of personal detail you'd expect from someone who lived with her grandmother. The breaking point came in mid-November. Ashley texted me that her grandmother had fallen and hurt her back, and asked if I could come by to help move some heavy boxes to make the house more accessible for her while she recovered. When I arrived, Rose answered the door as usual, but she didn't seem injured at all. She was moving normally, without any sign of back problems. "How are you feeling?" I asked as she led me inside. "Ashley said you took a fall?" Rose looked confused for a moment. "A fall? No, I haven't fallen. I've been feeling fine." A cold realization started creeping over me. "Rose, can I ask you something? When was the last time you saw Ashley?" Rose paused, leaning on her cane, and looked at me with those sharp eyes. "Ashley? Honey, I don't know anyone named Ashley." My stomach dropped. "Your granddaughter, Ashley Martinez. The nursing student who lives here and takes care of you?" Rose's expression changed completely. The friendly, grandmotherly smile disappeared, and she looked suddenly guilty and afraid. I don't have a granddaughter," she said quietly. "I don't have any family left." I felt like the floor was falling out from under me. "Then who am I talking to online? Whose photos are those?" Rose sat down heavily in her recliner, suddenly looking every one of her 70-something years. "Sit down, Tyler. I need to tell you something." What she told me next was one of the most heartbreaking and disturbing things I'd ever heard. Rose had been living alone in that house for 8 years, ever since her husband died. She had no children, no grandchildren, no close family at all. She'd been struggling with severe loneliness and depression. "I found those photos online," she admitted, tears in her eyes. "They were from some girl's social media account. I created the dating profile because I was so desperate for someone to talk to, someone to care about me." She explained that she'd been running the Ashley profile for over a year, talking to dozens of young men online. Most of them lost interest when Ashley didn't want to meet up right away, but a few, like me, had been willing to help when she mentioned her grandmother's problems. "I never meant for it to go this far," Rose said, crying now. "I just wanted someone to talk to. When you offered to help, I thought maybe I could have a few visits, someone to do a little work around the house. I didn't think you'd keep coming back." I was stunned. Everything about our online relationship had been a lie. The nursing student, the caring granddaughter, the whole story, it was all fabricated by a lonely elderly woman who was so desperate for human connection that she'd created an elaborate deception. "Rose, this is really messed up," I said, trying to process what I'd learned. "You've been lying to me for months. You made me believe I was helping someone my own age, that I might have a romantic relationship with someone. I know," she sobbed. "I know it was wrong. But you seemed so kind, and you kept coming back, and I started to feel like maybe I had a friend. I haven't had anyone to talk to in so long." The worst part was that I could see how genuinely lonely and desperate she was. Her deception was awful, but it came from a place of such profound isolation that I almost felt sorry for her. "How many other guys have you done this to?" I asked. "A few," she admitted. "Most of them stopped coming after 1 or 2 visits. You're the only one who kept helping for this long." I sat there in her living room, surrounded by the evidence of her loneliness, family photos of people long dead, a house that was too big for one person, the desperate gratitude she'd shown every time I'd visited, and I didn't know whether to be angry or heartbroken. "This has to stop, Rose," I said finally. "You can't keep catfishing people. It's not fair to them, and it's not healthy for you." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know. I'll delete the profile. I don't know what else to do. I'm so alone." I ended up staying for another hour, talking to her about resources for seniors in her community, senior centers, volunteer programs, social services. She promised to look into getting help for her loneliness in legitimate ways. Before I left, I had to ask, the things you said as Ashley, about caring about me, about appreciating the help, was any of that real? The appreciation was real, she said quietly. You've been kinder to me than anyone has been in years. But I know that doesn't excuse what I did. I drove home that day feeling completely violated but also profoundly sad. Rose's loneliness was real and heartbreaking, but her method of dealing with it had been manipulative and wrong. She'd stolen photos from some innocent girl online, created a fake identity, and used it to trick men into giving her attention and help. I reported the fake profile to Bumble, and it was taken down within a day. I also looked up the real Ashley Martinez, the girl whose photos Rose had stolen, and found her on Instagram. I sent her a message explaining what had happened, and she was horrified. She filed her own report about the identity theft. Rose's case wasn't unique, I learned. The dating app companies deal with fake profiles created by lonely people all the time, though most aren't as elaborate or long-term as Rose's deception. The combination of social isolation and easy access to other people's photos online creates opportunities for this kind of fraud. I never went back to Rose's house, though I did call the county senior services department to make sure someone checked on her. They told me she'd enrolled in a senior daycare program and was getting counseling for depression. The experience taught me that online relationships can be manipulated in ways I'd never considered. It wasn't just about people lying about their age or using old photos. It was about someone creating an entirely fictional person to fulfill their emotional needs at the expense of others. I also learned that loneliness can drive people to commit acts they know are wrong. Rose wasn't evil, but her desperation had led her to violate other people's trust and steal someone's identity. It made me think about how many isolated people there are in our communities and how few resources exist to help them connect with others in healthy ways. The hardest part was reconciling the genuine gratitude and kindness Rose had shown me during my visits with the elaborate lie she'd been living. In person, she'd been a sweet, lonely grandmother who appreciated help around the house. Online, she'd been a manipulative stranger using a stolen identity to trick men into giving her attention. Have you ever discovered that someone you were talking to online wasn't who they claimed to be? How do you think we should balance sympathy for lonely people with the need to protect others from being deceived? What would you do if you found out your photos were being used by someone else to create fake dating profiles? The comments section is a safe space to share your own experiences with online deception, whether you've been a victim or witnessed it happening to others. Let's talk about how we can better protect ourselves while still being open to genuine connections. What I witnessed on December 3, 2023, at Westfield Cafe in Petaluma, California, was the most calculated and cruel manipulation I've ever seen in the dating world. I thought I was just grabbing coffee on a quiet Sunday afternoon to grade papers, but what I discovered about human psychology and the lengths some people will go to for their own twisted entertainment still makes me sick to my stomach. The man I saw that day had turned dating into a sadistic social experiment, and two innocent women were his unwitting test subjects in a psychological manipulation that connected to a much larger network of predatory behavior. I was sitting in my usual corner booth at Westfield Cafe, grading papers for the high school psychology classes I teach at Petaluma High School, when I noticed something strange happening at two tables across the room from each other. Both tables had been reserved with small printed signs that said, "Reserved Marcus 2 p.m." And both had single women sitting at them, clearly waiting for dates. The first woman, a blonde in her late 20s wearing a blue dress and silver jewelry, kept checking her phone and looking toward the entrance with that mixture of excitement and nervousness that comes with meeting someone new. She'd ordered a large latte and was playing with her bracelet while occasionally glancing at the door. The second woman, a brunette about the same age wearing a black sweater and jeans, was exhibiting the exact same behavior at a table about 15 feet away. She'd ordered a cappuccino and kept smoothing her hair while checking the time on her phone. Both women had arrived within minutes of each other, right around 2 p.m., and both clearly looked like they were on first dates. They had that particular energy of someone who'd spent extra time getting ready, choosing their outfit carefully, and was genuinely excited about meeting someone they'd been talking to online. What caught my attention initially was the mathematical impossibility of the situation. Two women, same name for their date, same time, same cafe. I initially thought it was just a bizarre coincidence. Maybe two different guys named Marcus had chosen the same popular coffee spot for their Sunday afternoon dates. Stranger things had happened. Then I noticed the man sitting at a table positioned perfectly between both women, where he could observe both of them without being obvious about it. He was probably in his early 30s, wearing a dark gray sweater and dark jeans, with a silver MacBook Pro open in front of him. But instead of working on whatever was on his screen, he was clearly watching both women with the focused attention of someone conducting surveillance. Something about his behavior immediately triggered my teacher instincts. I've spent 15 years observing student behavior, watching for signs of cheating, bullying, or other problematic conduct, and this guy was exhibiting all the classic signs of someone conducting some kind of systematic observation or experiment. The way he positioned himself with clear sidelines to both tables, the methodical way he would type notes while glancing at the women, and the discreet way he would occasionally lift his phone to take photos, it was all too deliberate and calculated to be coincidental. He had a small notebook beside his laptop, and I could see him making handwritten notes in addition to whatever he was typing. Every few minutes he'd observe one woman or the other, write something down, then type something on his computer. He was documenting their behavior with scientific precision. Both women continued waiting, growing increasingly uncomfortable as the minutes passed. The blonde kept glancing at her watch and checking her phone, occasionally typing what looked like text messages. The brunette was doing the same thing, looking around the cafe with growing embarrassment and confusion. They were both clearly being stood up, but neither seemed to realize there was another woman in the exact same situation just a few feet away. Around 2:20 p.m., after both women had been waiting for 20 minutes, the man with the laptop closed it, stood up, and approached the blonde woman's table. I couldn't hear exactly what he said from where I was sitting, but I could see their interaction clearly. He appeared to be apologizing profusely, gesturing in a way that suggested he was explaining some delay or emergency that had kept him from arriving on time. The woman's face immediately lit up with relief and happiness. The anxiety and embarrassment of being stood up disappeared, replaced by the warm smile of someone whose faith in human nature had been restored. She gestured for him to sit down, and he took the chair across from her, leaning forward in an engaged, attentive posture. They talked for about 10 minutes, and their conversation appeared to be going very well. The woman was laughing, leaning forward, playing with her hair in the way people do when they're genuinely attracted to someone. He was mirroring her body language, maintaining eye contact, and exhibiting all the signs of someone who was completely focused on making a good impression. Then, abruptly, he excused himself, standing up and saying something that made the woman nod understandingly. He gestured toward his phone in a way that suggested he needed to take an important call or handle some urgent business. The woman smiled and waved him away, clearly not upset about the interruption. But instead of leaving the cafe or going outside to take a call, he walked back toward his original table, stopping to quickly type something on his laptop and make notes in his notebook. Then, to my absolute shock, he approached the brunette's table and went through what appeared to be the exact same apologetic routine. My stomach dropped as I realized what was happening. This wasn't a case of a guy juggling two dates and trying to keep both women happy. This was something far more sinister and calculated. He was deliberately orchestrating some kind of psychological experiment, and both women were completely unaware that they were being manipulated and studied. The brunette reacted exactly the same way the blonde had. Relief, happiness, engagement. She'd been sitting there for over 20 minutes, probably questioning whether she'd been catfished or stood up, wondering what was wrong with her that someone would invite her out and then not show up. When he appeared with his apologies and explanations, she was clearly grateful and excited to finally meet the person she'd been talking to online. He spent about 10 minutes with her as well, going through what appeared to be very similar conversation topics and getting the same positive responses. The brunette was laughing, leaning forward, clearly enjoying herself and feeling that connection that comes with meeting someone you've been looking forward to seeing. Then he excused himself again, using what looked like the same excuse he'd given the blonde. He returned to his laptop, typed more extensive notes, and I could see him comparing whatever he'd written about both interactions. Over the next hour and a half, I watched him cycle between both tables in a systematic pattern. He'd spend 10 to 15 minutes with one woman, excuse himself for 5 to 10 minutes to document his observations, then spend time with the other woman. He'd developed elaborate excuses for his periodic absences: work calls, family emergencies, bathroom breaks, going to his car to get something he'd forgotten. The women seemed to be enjoying their individual conversations with him, but I could see their growing confusion and discomfort during the periods when he'd disappear. They'd both check their phones constantly, look around the cafe with puzzled expressions, and seem to question whether something was wrong with this guy who kept having to step away from their date. What made the whole situation even more disturbing was how methodical and scientific he was about documenting their reactions. Every time he returned to his laptop, he typed detailed notes, occasionally take more discrete photos, and I could see him creating what looked like comparative charts or graphs. He was treating these women like laboratory subjects in some kind of behavioral study. I found myself in a serious moral dilemma. Should I say something to the women? Should I confront the man directly? I didn't want to make assumptions about what was happening, but everything I was observing suggested something deeply wrong and potentially harmful was going on. These women were being deceived and manipulated, and they had no idea. As someone who teaches psychology, I was also horrified by the ethical violations I was witnessing. If this was some kind of research, it was being conducted without informed consent, without proper oversight, and in a way that was clearly causing emotional distress to the subjects. Everything about it violated basic principles of ethical human research. The situation reached a crisis point around 3:30 p.m. The man had been with the blonde for about 15 minutes, and their conversation seemed to be getting more intimate and personal. I could see her leaning closer, laughing more freely, and exhibiting all the signs of someone who was developing genuine feelings for the person across from her. That's when the brunette got up from her table and walked toward the bathroom. Her route took her directly past the blonde's table, and she stopped short when she heard the man mention something about his profile on Hinge and how much he'd enjoyed their text conversations over the past week. "Excuse me," the brunette said, interrupting their conversation with a confused expression. "Did you just say Hinge? Are you Marcus from Hinge?" Both women looked puzzled, and the man's face went completely pale. He'd been caught in his deception, and there was no way to explain away what was happening. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" the blonde asked the brunette, clearly not understanding why the stranger was interrupting her date. "I'm supposed to be on a date with Marcus from Hinge," the brunette said, looking between the man and the blonde with growing realization. "We matched last week and arranged to meet here today at 2 p.m. I've been waiting for over an hour." The blonde's expression changed from confusion to horror as the implications sank in. "That's impossible. I'm on a date with Marcus from Hinge. We've been talking for over an hour. We matched last week too." Both women turned to look at the man, who was now clearly panicking. He started to stand up, probably hoping to escape the situation, but the brunette blocked his path. "What the hell is going on here?" she demanded, her voice getting louder and attracting attention from other customers. That's when I decided I had to get involved. As a teacher, I'd seen enough bullying, manipulation, and predatory behavior to recognize it when I saw it, and this situation was escalating quickly. These women deserved to know the truth about what had been done to them. I walked over to their table, carrying my grade book to establish my credibility as someone who had legitimate reason to be observing behavior. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, "but I think you both need to know what I've been watching for the past hour and a half. I'm a high school teacher, and I've been sitting over their grading papers. I couldn't help but notice what's been happening." I explained everything I'd witnessed: the man cycling between both tables, the systematic note-taking on his laptop, the discreet photography, the way he positioned himself to observe both women simultaneously. I told them about the reserved signs at both tables, the coordinated timing of their arrivals, and the clear evidence that this was some kind of planned experiment rather than a coincidental scheduling mix-up. The women were horrified as they realized the extent of the deception. The man tried to deny it at first, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that he'd accidentally double-booked himself, and was trying to handle the situation as diplomatically as possible. But when I mentioned the detailed note-taking, the photography, and the scientific precision of his observations, his story completely fell apart. Other customers were starting to stare, and the cafe manager was beginning to take notice of the commotion. "You've been taking notes about us?" the blonde asked, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and violation. "Like we're some kind of science experiment? You've been photographing us without our consent?" the brunette added, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police." Under pressure from all three of us, with other cafe customers starting to gather around and express their own outrage, the man finally broke down and admitted what he'd been doing. The truth was even worse than I'd imagined. His name was actually Derek Chin, and he was a graduate student in social psychology at UC Davis. He'd been using dating apps to conduct unauthorized research on female behavior and emotional responses to various dating scenarios. He'd create multiple profiles using the same photos and personal information, then arrange simultaneous dates with different women to observe and document their reactions to uncertainty, rejection, competition, and emotional manipulation. "It's for my thesis research," he said defensively, as if that somehow justified what he'd been doing. "I'm studying female emotional responses to dating uncertainty and social stress. This kind of naturalistic observation is invaluable for understanding authentic behavior patterns that can't be replicated in a laboratory setting." The women were furious, and their anger was completely justified. They'd been deceived, manipulated, and used as unwitting research subjects. What they thought were genuine romantic connections were actually calculated psychological experiments designed to exploit their emotions and vulnerabilities. "You had no right to do this to us," the blonde said, tears of anger streaming down her face. "We're not lab rats for your entertainment. We're human beings who trusted you. Do you realize how violated we feel?" the brunette added, her voice getting louder. "You've been studying us, taking pictures of us, documenting our most private emotions like we're specimens in a petri dish." Derek tried to defend his actions, claiming that his research would ultimately benefit women by helping men understand female psychology better. He insisted that no one had been harmed because both women had enjoyed their conversations with him and had consented to being in a public place where they could theoretically be observed. "The harm is in the deception and the violation of consent," I told him, my teacher instincts kicking in. "You can't justify psychological manipulation by claiming it's for the greater good of scientific research. These women didn't consent to being studied, and you violated their dignity and autonomy." The cafe manager had come over by this point, and when we explained the situation, she revealed that Derek had been reserving multiple tables under different names for several weeks. Other customers had complained about his behavior, taking photos, making notes, acting strangely, but no one had understood what he was doing until now. The women demanded to see what he'd written about them. Derek reluctantly opened his laptop, which contained detailed behavioral observations, psychological assessments, and comparative analysis of their reactions to his various manipulations. He documented everything from how long they waited before showing signs of anxiety to how they responded to different conversation topics, compliments, and emotional triggers. The files were extensive and disturbing. He'd rated their physical attractiveness, analyzed their clothing choices, assessed their emotional stability based on their reactions to being kept waiting, and made detailed notes about their body language, facial expressions, and verbal responses. He'd even timed how long it took each woman to forgive him for being late, and how their behavior changed when he showed interest versus when he seemed distracted. Even worse, they discovered he'd been taking photos throughout the afternoon and had created detailed psychological profiles of both women based on their dating app conversations, social media research, and his in-person observations. He knew their full names, where they worked, their educational backgrounds, their family situations, and had made amateur psychological diagnoses of their personalities, insecurities, and emotional needs. "This is stalking," the brunette said, scrolling through his files. "You've been researching us like we're targets for some kind of manipulation." The blonde found her photos in his digital files, along with numerical ratings of her physical attractiveness and detailed analysis of her emotional responses to his behavior. "You rated my emotional stability based on how I reacted to being stood up," she said, incredulous. "You made judgments about my mental health based on a dating scenario you artificially created?" As we continued to examine his computer, we discovered that Derek had been running similar experiments for over 8 months, using different cafes, restaurants, and bars throughout the Greater Bay Area. His laptop contained psychological profiles and behavioral documentation on dozens of women, all created without their knowledge or consent. Some experiments involved making women wait for varying lengths of time to see how long they'd tolerate being stood up and how their behavior changed as their anxiety increased. Others involved testing their reactions to different personality types, conversation topics, or levels of romantic interest. He documented women's responses to nigging, love bombing, emotional withdrawal, and various other manipulation techniques. The most disturbing discovery was that he'd been sharing his findings with online communities dedicated to manipulating women in dating situations. He was part of a network of men who treated dating like psychological warfare, sharing techniques for emotional manipulation and documenting women's responses to various forms of deception and abuse. His thesis project was focused on identifying emotional vulnerabilities in women that could be exploited by men seeking to establish dominance in relationships. He was literally trying to create a scientific framework for psychological abuse disguised as romantic courtship. Both women immediately filed police reports for harassment, stalking, and invasion of privacy. Derek was also reported to UC Davis for conducting unauthorized human subjects research without proper ethical oversight, informed consent, or institutional review board approval. The investigation revealed that Derek had violated numerous laws and university policies. He was arrested on charges of stalking, harassment, and identity fraud related to his fake dating profiles. UC Davis launched a comprehensive investigation into his behavior and ultimately expelled him from the psychology program, citing severe ethical violations and potential harm to research subjects. The incident made regional news when it was discovered that Derek had been conducting these experiments at multiple locations throughout Northern California and had documented interactions with over 40 different women. Several other women came forward with similar experiences, describing dates where they felt like they were being studied, tested, or manipulated rather than genuinely getting to know someone. The story highlighted a disturbing trend in online dating where some men treat women as subjects for psychological experimentation rather than as human beings deserving of respect and honesty. Dating apps have made it easier for predatory individuals to access multiple victims and conduct elaborate deceptions while maintaining anonymity and plausible deniability. Both women I witnessed that day have permanently deleted their dating apps and sworn off online dating entirely. They've both spoken publicly about their experience, hoping to warn other women about the signs of psychological manipulation in dating situations and the importance of trusting their instincts when something feels wrong. The incident taught me that the digital age has created new opportunities for predatory behavior that many people aren't prepared to recognize or defend against. What seemed like normal dating app conversations, typical first date nervousness, and common scheduling difficulties were actually carefully orchestrated psychological experiments designed to exploit women's emotions, document their vulnerabilities, and share that information with others who intended to use it for manipulation. As a psychology teacher, I've incorporated this experience into my curriculum as a case study in research ethics, informed consent, and the importance of protecting human subjects in any kind of behavioral study. It's a powerful example of how easily people can be manipulated when they trust that others are acting in good faith and have legitimate intentions. The cafe where this happened has since implemented new policies about table reservations, suspicious photography, and customer harassment. They've trained their staff to recognize signs of stalking, manipulation, or predatory behavior among their customers and have established protocols for handling situations where customers feel unsafe or violated. This story connects to all the others in our collection because it demonstrates how dating apps can be weaponized by people who see others as objects to be manipulated, studied, or controlled rather than human beings deserving of respect and dignity. Whether it's stalking, identity theft, family control, or psychological experimentation, the common thread is individuals who refuse to accept that others have autonomy, privacy, and the right to make their own choices about their relationships and personal lives. Have you ever felt like someone was studying you or testing your reactions during a date? What red flags have you noticed that suggested someone wasn't being genuine about their intentions? How do you think dating apps could better protect users from this kind of psychological manipulation and predatory research? Share your own experiences in the comments section below. Together, we can help each other recognize and avoid these predatory behaviors in the dating world. Your story might help someone else avoid becoming an unwitting subject in someone else's twisted experiment. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.